The world of crime is a stage. It is a place where shadows dance and truth becomes elusive. In this world, few performers have commanded the spotlight quite like Frédéric Bourdin. His act, deception, his talent, unparalleled. Bourdin, known as the Chameleon, moved through the world cloaked in artifice. He was a phantom, a whisper of a person, always just out of reach of his true identity. His life was a tapestry of lies, woven so intricately that even the most discerning eye could be fooled. For years, Bourdin spun tales that ensnared families, law enforcement, and even entire communities. He slipped into identities like a second skin, becoming whoever he needed to be to satisfy his insatiable appetite for deception. His story is a chilling reminder of the fragility of truth and the ease with which a master manipulator can pull the wool over our eyes. But Bourdin's story is not just about the lies he told. It's about the people who believed him. It's about the human need to trust and the vulnerability that comes with it. It's about the fine line between reality and illusion and the ease with which that line can be blurred. Frédéric Bourdin's story begins in 1974 in Nanterre, France. Even as a child, there was a sense that Bourdin was different. He possessed an uncanny ability to blend in, to become invisible, to disappear. Some might call it a gift, others a curse. His early life was marked by instability and a longing for connection. He craved acceptance, a place to belong. Perhaps this is where the seeds of deception were sown, in the fertile ground of a childhood starved for love and attention. As a teenager, Bourdin's talent for manipulation began to blossom. He discovered that he could use his words to craft a new reality, one where he was no longer the lonely, neglected boy, but someone worthy of love and attention. Small deceptions grew into elaborate schemes. He became a master of disguise, altering his appearance and mannerisms to fit the roles he played. His lies were not simply words. They were performances, carefully crafted to evoke sympathy, trust, and ultimately control. Bourdin's early cons were a testament to his growing skill. He targeted those who were vulnerable, those desperate for hope, those willing to believe. He preyed on their compassion, their empathy, their very humanity. He became adept at reading people, sensing their weaknesses and exploiting them to his advantage. He could weave a web of lies so intricate, so convincing, that even the most skeptical observer would find themselves ensnared. With each successful con, Bourdin's confidence grew. He became bolder, his deceptions more audacious. He was no longer content with petty thefts or minor scams. He craved something more, something bigger, something that would cement his legacy as a true master of deception. And then, in 1997, Bourdin would find his most audacious role yet. Nicholas Barkley, a missing boy from Texas, a ghost waiting to be resurrected. This time, the stakes were higher, the potential consequences graver. But for Frédéric Bourdin, the allure of the challenge, the opportunity to disappear into another life, was too tempting to resist. Bourdin's foray into the world of deception began in his adolescence. He was a chameleon even then, slipping in and out of personas with an ease that belied his young age. His first significant con took place when he was just a teenager. He was a master of observation, acutely aware of the vulnerabilities that plagued those around him. He noticed the worried faces plastered on missing person posters, the desperation etched into the lines around the eyes of grieving parents. He saw an opportunity not to exploit, but to become the answer to their prayers, to offer them the solace they so desperately craved. And so began his career not as a criminal, but as a provider of false hope. He transformed himself into a missing child, weaving a narrative of abduction and escape. He played the part to perfection, his youthful features and innocent demeanor disarming any suspicion. He was embraced by families, welcomed into their homes, their relief at his return momentarily blinding them to the inconsistencies that lurked beneath the surface. The charade wouldn't last, of course. Eventually, the truth would unravel, the mask would slip, and Bourdin would vanish as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak and bewilderment. But for a brief time, he had tasted the intoxicating power of deception, the thrill of becoming someone else, and he was hooked. Section 2. The Art of Transformation, Mimicry, and Manipulation. Bourdin's success lay not only in his ability to spin elaborate tales, but also in his mastery of transformation. He was a chameleon in the truest sense, adapting his appearance and mannerisms to seamlessly blend into any environment. He studied the nuances of human behavior, the subtle cues that conveyed emotion, the gestures that betrayed true intentions. He could mimic accents with astonishing accuracy, adopting the cadence and slang of his assumed identity. He would spend hours studying photographs, memorizing facial expressions, practicing the art of becoming someone else. To him, it was more than just deception. It was performance art, a meticulous craft that he honed with each passing con. He understood the power of vulnerability, the disarming effect of appearing lost and in need of help. He would often invent tragic backstories for his assumed identities, tales designed to elicit sympathy and lower the guard of his targets. He played on their empathy, their innate desire to help those in need, making them complicit in their own deception. But beneath the surface, behind the carefully constructed facade, lay a calculating mind, always one step ahead, anticipating every question, every doubt, every challenge to his carefully constructed reality. He was a master puppeteer, pulling at the strings of human emotion, orchestrating his own twisted symphony of lies. Section 3. Across continents, Bourdin's expanding deceptions. As Bourdin's confidence grew, so too did his ambition. He was no longer content with small-time cons. He craved the challenge of bigger games, higher stakes, and international intrigue. He set his sights beyond the borders of France, drawn to the anonymity that came with being a stranger in a foreign land. He traversed Europe, leaving a trail of false identities in his wake. He became a phantom, appearing and disappearing at will, his true self always just out of reach. He was a master of reinvention, each new identity a blank canvas upon which he could paint his latest masterpiece of deception. He impersonated missing teenagers, orphaned runaways, and amnesiac travelers, each persona meticulously crafted to exploit the vulnerabilities of his chosen targets. He navigated cultural differences with ease, adapting his stories to fit the local context, his performances becoming more convincing with each passing con. To the outside world, he was a ghost, a whisper of a man, his true identity known only to himself. But behind the ever-changing facade lay a dangerous intelligence, a cunning manipulator who understood the intricacies of human nature and exploited them with ruthless efficiency. He was a force to be reckoned with, a master of deception who seemed to operate outside the bounds of conventional morality. Section 1. The Missing Boy from Texas. A Golden Opportunity. In 1994, a young boy named Nicholas Barkley vanished from his home in San Antonio, Texas. He was just 13 years old, a mischievous boy with a mop of blonde hair and a gap-toothed grin. His disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, leaving his family shattered and a town grappling with the unthinkable. Years passed, and the case grew cold. The Barkley family, consumed by grief and a desperate hope for his return, clung to the faintest possibility that Nicholas was still alive, somewhere out there, waiting to be found. Their story, a parent's worst nightmare, resonated far beyond the borders of Texas, becoming a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of hope. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Frédéric Bourdin, ever the opportunist, saw their tragedy as his next grand performance. He had been following the case, drawn to the high-profile nature of the disappearance and the sheer improbability of assuming the identity of a missing child from a different continent. It was a challenge too tempting to resist, a chance to disappear into a new life, a life where he could rewrite his past and become the object of a family's unwavering love. And so, with meticulous care, he began to craft his most audacious deception yet, transforming himself into the missing boy from Texas, the ghost of Nicholas Barkley. Section 2. A family in mourning, Bourdin seizes the moment. Bourdin, ever the student of human behavior, knew that to convince the Barkley family, he needed more than just a physical resemblance. He needed to embody their memories of Nicholas, to reflect their hopes and dreams for his return. He studied photographs, memorizing every detail of Nicholas's appearance, from the way he smiled to the way he held his head. He practiced speaking with a Texan drawl, mimicking the accent he had heard in countless news reports. He invented a backstory, a tale of abduction and abuse, carefully designed to elicit sympathy and explain away any discrepancies in his appearance or behavior. He contacted the authorities, claiming to be Nicholas, recently escaped from his captors. He was evasive about the details of his ordeal, claiming amnesia, a common side effect of trauma. His story, a potent cocktail of truth and fabrication, was met with a mixture of skepticism and cautious optimism. The Barclay family, desperate for any sign of their lost son, clung to his every word. They were willing to overlook the differences in his appearance, attributing them to the trauma he had endured. They saw in Bourdin the echo of their beloved Nicholas, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Section 3. Life as Nicholas blending into a new reality. Bourdin's arrival in Texas was met with a media frenzy. He was embraced by the Barclay family, welcomed into their home as the prodigal son returned. He slipped into the role of Nicholas with unsettling ease, mimicking his mannerisms, adopting his interests, even mirroring his family's dynamics. He attended school, made friends, and gradually began to build a new life for himself, all the while carefully maintaining the facade of a traumatized teenager struggling to reclaim his past. He played the part to perfection, his performance so convincing that even those closest to Nicholas began to doubt their own memories. Bourdin thrived on the attention, the adoration, the unwavering belief of those around him. He had finally found the acceptance he had craved since childhood, albeit under false pretenses. The charade, however, was becoming increasingly complex, the lies more difficult to maintain. He was living on borrowed time, the threat of exposure constantly looming. He knew that the truth would eventually surface, but for the time being, he was content to bask in the warmth of the Barclay family's love, a love he knew he didn't deserve. Section 4. Doubts and suspicions, cracks in the facade. As the weeks turned into months, doubts began to surface. There were inconsistencies in Bourdin's story, subtle discrepancies that chipped away at the carefully constructed facade. His eyes, a piercing blue, were not the same color as Nicholas's. His accent, though convincing, would occasionally slip, revealing a hint of something foreign, something unplaceable. A private investigator, hired by a television network producing a documentary about the case, noticed these discrepancies. He began to dig deeper, uncovering inconsistencies in Bourdin's story, questioning his past, his origins, his very identity. The investigator shared his findings with the FBI, who were initially reluctant to reopen the case. But the evidence was mounting, the doubts too significant to ignore. They began their own investigation, discreetly collecting DNA samples, reviewing Bourdin's story, looking for the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. The truth, it seemed, was slowly beginning to unravel, like a thread pulled loose from a tapestry, threatening to unravel the entire intricate design. Bourdin, sensing the walls closing in, clung ever tighter to his charade, his performance becoming more desperate, more frantic, as the threat of exposure loomed larger with each passing day. Whispers of doubt. The investigation begins. The documentary crew's involvement proved to be a turning point. Driven by a journalist's instinct to uncover the truth, they began to meticulously retrace Bourdin's steps, scrutinizing his every word, every gesture. They noticed subtle discrepancies in his accounts, inconsistencies that had slipped past a family blinded by hope and a community eager to embrace a feel-good story. Whispers of doubt, initially dismissed as the ramblings of skeptics, began to grow louder, fueled by the documentary crew's findings. The private investigator, relentless in his pursuit of the truth, uncovered inconsistencies in Bourdin's claims about his past, his origins, his very identity. He discovered that Bourdin had a history of impersonating children, a pattern of deception that had taken him across continents, leaving a trail of shattered lives in his wake. The investigator, sensing the gravity of the situation, shared his findings with the FBI, urging them to reopen the investigation, to look beyond the surface, to see the truth hidden in plain sight. The FBI, initially hesitant to dismiss the possibility that Nicholas Barclay had been found, began to take a closer look at the case. They were presented with a young man who bore a striking resemblance to the missing boy, who had convinced a grieving family of his identity, but whose story was riddled with inconsistencies and whose past was shrouded in a suspicious fog. The unraveling DNA testing and mounting evidence. The FBI, armed with the private investigator's findings and their own growing suspicions, decided to pursue a more definitive route: DNA testing. They collected samples from Bourdin and compared them to DNA profiles of the Barclay family, hoping to either confirm or debunk his claims once and for all. The results were conclusive. The DNA test proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Frédéric Bourdin was not Nicholas Barclay. The science was irrefutable, the evidence undeniable. The young man who had been living as Nicholas, embraced by a family desperate for their son's return, was an imposter. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, turning relief into outrage, hope into anger. The Barclay family, who had opened their home and hearts to Bourdin, felt betrayed, their grief compounded by the cruel realization that they had been deceived, their love and hope exploited by a master manipulator. The FBI, now with irrefutable proof of Bourdin's deception, moved swiftly to apprehend him. They arrested him on charges of passport fraud and perjury, the weight of his lies finally catching up with him. The charade was over, the mask slipping away to reveal the true face of the chameleon. Unmasking the chameleon, Bourdin's lies exposed. Bourdin's arrest marked the end of his elaborate charade, but it also marked the beginning of a media frenzy. The story of the imposter who had fooled a family and a nation captivated the world, raising questions about identity, deception, and the lengths to which some will go to escape their past. Newspapers and television stations clamored for interviews, eager to unravel the mind of the man who had so convincingly assumed the identity of a missing child. Psychologists and criminologists offered their expert opinions, attempting to explain Bourdin's motivations, to delve into the psyche of a master manipulator. Some saw him as a con artist, motivated by greed or a desire for notoriety. Others saw him as a troubled soul, driven by a need for acceptance, a longing for the love and stability that had eluded him in his own life. Bourdin himself, in various interviews, offered conflicting explanations, sometimes expressing remorse, other times seeming to revel in the notoriety his deceptions had brought him. The truth, as always with Bourdin, remained elusive, hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of half-truths, calculated confessions, and a disarming charm that continued to both intrigue and repel those who encountered him. In the aftermath of Bourdin's unmasking, the Barclay family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They had endured the agonizing uncertainty of Nicholas's disappearance, clung to hope for his return, only to be dealt a cruel blow of deception. The betrayal cut deep, leaving them emotionally drained, their trust shaken, their faith in humanity tested. The media attention, while offering some solace in knowing that Nicholas's case was back in the spotlight, also brought unwanted scrutiny, reopening old wounds and forcing them to relive the most painful chapter of their lives. The family struggled to reconcile the memories of the young man who had shared their home, their meals, their lives with the realization that he had been an imposter all along. They grappled with feelings of guilt for having been deceived, for allowing themselves to believe, for momentarily letting hope triumph over reason. Bourdin's actions had far-reaching consequences, leaving a trail of emotional devastation in their wake. The family, deeply scarred by the experience, was left to navigate the long and arduous path toward healing, forever marked by the shadow of the chameleon who had shattered their lives. The weight of Bourdin's lies finally caught up with him in a Texas courtroom. He faced charges of passport fraud and perjury, the prosecution presenting a compelling case that detailed the calculated nature of his deception and the emotional toll it had taken on the Barclay family. Bourdin, despite having been caught red-handed, maintained an air of ambiguity throughout the trial. He oscillated between expressing remorse for the pain he had caused and seeming to relish the notoriety he had gained. His true motivations, as always, remained elusive, shrouded in a fog of half-truths and calculated pronouncements. The jury, however, was unconvinced by his performance. They found him guilty on all counts, recognizing the depth of his deception and the callous disregard he had shown for the Barclay family's grief. He was sentenced to 6 years in a US prison, a stark reminder that even the most skilled con artists are not above the law. While some argued that the sentence was too lenient given the emotional devastation he had caused, others saw it as a just punishment for a man who had exploited the vulnerabilities of a grieving family for his own gain. The judge, in his closing remarks, acknowledged the complexity of the case, noting that Bourdin's actions were both audacious and heartbreaking, a testament to the enduring power of human deception. Section 2. The Chameleon's Shadow, a pattern of recurrence. Bourdin's time behind bars did little to quell his desire for deception. Upon his release from prison in 2003, he returned to Europe, his notoriety preceding him. He was a celebrity of sorts, his story having captivated the world and cemented his reputation as a master manipulator. Despite having served time for his crimes, Bourdin seemed unable or unwilling to resist the allure of slipping into new identities. He resurfaced in various European countries, assuming the guises of missing teenagers, amnesiac travelers, and troubled youths, his chameleon-like ability to transform himself still intact. He continued to prey on the kindness of strangers, exploiting their empathy and their willingness to believe his carefully crafted tales. Each new deception, however, became a frantic race against time, his notoriety making it increasingly difficult to maintain his facades for long. His story, once a source of fascination, began to take on a darker tone, his actions viewed less as the harmless pranks of a mischievous trickster and more as the calculated manipulations of a dangerous predator. The chameleon's shadow, it seemed, stretched far beyond the walls of the prison cell, a constant reminder of the enduring power of deception and the fragility of trust. Section 3. Beyond the Bars. The enduring enigma of Frédéric Bourdin. Despite numerous arrests, convictions, and exposures, Frédéric Bourdin remains an enigma. His motives, the driving force behind his relentless pursuit of deception, continue to intrigue and baffle psychologists, criminologists, and the public alike. Some experts believe that his actions stem from a troubled childhood, a desperate need for love and acceptance that manifested in a pathological need to create false identities and seek validation through deception. Others speculate that he is driven by a thirst for notoriety, a desire to leave his mark on the world, even if it means doing so through lies and manipulation. Bourdin himself has offered conflicting explanations over the years, sometimes expressing remorse for his actions, other times seeming to revel in the attention they have brought him. He has claimed to be a victim of circumstance, a lost soul searching for belonging, a master manipulator who cannot help but play the role fate has cast him in. The truth, as always with Bourdin, remains elusive, hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of half-truths, calculated pronouncements, and a disarming charm that continues to both intrigue and repel those who encounter him. He is a chameleon, a master of disguise, a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. His story a cautionary tale about the seductive power of deception and the enduring human need to believe. Section 1. The seductive power of deception. The story of Frédéric Bourdin is a chilling reminder of the seductive power of deception. It highlights the ease with which a skilled manipulator can exploit our vulnerabilities, our innate desire to believe, our longing for connection and belonging. Bourdin's success lay not only in his ability to craft elaborate lies, but also in his understanding of human psychology. He knew how to identify and exploit our weaknesses, to play on our emotions, to make us complicit in our own deception. He understood that the most convincing lies often contain a grain of truth, and he used this knowledge to weave intricate narratives that blurred the lines between reality and fabrication. His story serves as a cautionary tale, urging us to question our assumptions, to be wary of appearances, and to cultivate a healthy skepticism towards those who claim to offer easy answers or fulfill our deepest desires. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that even the most well-intentioned individuals can be fooled, that trust, once broken, can be incredibly difficult to rebuild. Bourdin's legacy is a complex one, a mix of fascination and revulsion, a testament to the enduring human capacity for both deception and self-deception. His story serves as a stark reminder that the truth is often elusive, hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed facades, and that the pursuit of it requires vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. Section 2. Guarding against the chameleon within. While Frédéric Bourdin's story may seem extraordinary, it also holds a mirror to a darker aspect of human nature. We all harbor within us the potential for deception, the ability to present a carefully curated version of ourselves to the world. We may not all possess Bourdin's extraordinary talent for manipulation, but we all engage in varying degrees of impression management, shaping our behavior and presentation to influence how others perceive us. We tell white lies, omit details, and present idealized versions of ourselves, often with the best of intentions, to smooth social interactions, protect ourselves from harm, or achieve desired outcomes. However, Bourdin's story serves as a stark reminder of the slippery slope that lies beyond these seemingly harmless deceptions. It compels us to examine our own relationship with truth, to question our motivations when we choose to conceal or distort information, and to consider the potential consequences of our actions, however small they may seem. Ultimately, guarding against the chameleon within requires a commitment to self-awareness, a willingness to confront our own capacity for deception, and a conscious effort to cultivate authenticity and integrity in our interactions with others. It is a lifelong journey, one that requires constant vigilance and a commitment to living in accordance with our values, even when it is difficult or inconvenient.